They thought he was just an ordinary old farmer. So they broke into his farm and eliminated his loyal dog. But they had no idea that the man they considered weak was once a Marine sniper and had now returned to his old ways. Meanwhile, in Mexico, a young boy named Miguel lives with his mother, Rosa. Rosa is cooking dinner in their small house in the afternoon heat when suddenly her phone rings. The call is from her brother Carlos. His voice trembles as he explains that a powerful group is after him because he took a large sum of money from them. In a panic, he tells Rosa to retrieve the money she hid and leave Mexico as quickly as possible as time is running out. Moments after the call ends, the group captures Carlos. Their ruthless leader, Mauricio, checks his phone and sees Rosa's name in recent calls. He becomes convinced that Rosa knows something. Without mercy or consideration, they finish Carlos on the spot. On the American side, in Arizona, a retired Marine named Jim works on his barren, desolate farm. He lives near the US-Mexico border and always keeps an eye on his land. Whenever he sees someone crossing the border illegally, he immediately alerts the border patrol. One day, while watching his cattle, he spots some people sneaking through the desert. He immediately reports it and, curious, follows them from a distance. A short distance later, he discovers a man with an injured leg has been left behind and the others have fled. Jim quietly radios the location and returns home. He declares, "There's an injured man here, it would be better to send a doctor." Upon returning to his farm, his worries increase. A bank official arrives and reminds him of the outstanding balance. He hasn't made any payments in 6 months. Therefore, he receives a warning that his land will soon be auctioned. Since his wife's prolonged illness, Jim's savings have been depleted and he is deeply in debt. The bank clearly threatens to seize his house if he doesn't pay. Jim pleads with them to give him more time to recover. Finally, the official says he only has 3 months or everything will be gone. Jim replies, "I'm not stupid, I just need some time to get things sorted." He then sets out to find a job, but the employment office official tells him this isn't suitable for a man his age. However, he promises to try for another job next month. Jim doesn't give up and goes to sell his cattle hoping for some relief. But the price he gets is so low that he can't even repay a small portion of his debt. Even after selling everything, his situation remains the same. Exhausted, Jim sits in a nearby bar that evening, thinking that maybe a few drinks will ease the burden on his mind. Seeing his condition, the bartender calls his stepdaughter, Sarah, who works for the Border Patrol. Sarah arrives and sits next to Jim. They have a quiet conversation. Finally, Jim confesses that he's in debt and is about to lose his house. The night progresses. He tries to order another drink, but Sarah stops him and ensures he gets safely back to his farm. Meanwhile, Rosa and Miguel continue to flee. The next morning, they approach the border. They spot a small hole in the high iron fence. They attempt to cross through it into the United States as the dangerous group is closing in on them. Jim is standing nearby when he sees them cross the open gap. Rosa, terrified and desperate, begs Jim not to report them, but Jim begins calling the border guards. Shortly after, Mauricio's men arrive and demand they hand the boy over. Sensing the danger, Jim makes a quick decision to protect them. Almost immediately, a confrontation breaks out, and Jim neutralizes one of the attackers. He takes Rosa and Miguel in his truck and escapes, while Mauricio and his men pursue them through the desert. During the chase, Mauricio climbs onto Jim's truck, but Jim overpowers him and knocks him down. When Mauricio learns that the man Jim neutralized was his own brother, his anger intensifies. The matter is no longer about the stolen money, but personal. Mauricio's goal becomes finding Miguel and seeking revenge. While fleeing, Jim discovers Rosa is injured. She is badly hurt, her breathing irregular and her voice weak. With the last of her strength, she hands Jim a small folded note and address, explaining they belong to her relatives. She begs Jim to send Miguel to Chicago and warns that if the dangerous group finds the boy, they will eliminate him. Rosa passes away within moments. Police and paramedics later arrive at the scene. Sarah, now aware of the accident, informs Jim that Miguel will be kept at the station overnight and will be released to a foster care center the next day. The next morning, Jim awakens in his truck near the border crossing with his dog, Jackson, by his side. He lies there, reflecting on the events. Nearby is parked the same vehicle the group used the previous day. In his truck, he finds a bag left by Rosa. He opens it and discovers it is full of money. The sight of the blood-stained clothes brings back memories of Rosa's final moments. Money no longer seems like an easy solution to any problem. It has become Rosa's last wish and a duty he wants to fulfill. Remembering her request, he starts the engine and sets off again to find Miguel. Jim quickly arrives at the border checkpoint, and an officer tells him that Miguel was to be handed over to his relatives in Mexico. But the officer senses something is amiss. Looking out the window, Jim immediately recognizes some people standing outside. Remaining calm, he asks the officer for a few minutes to speak with Miguel alone. The officer agrees and allows him inside. Once inside, Jim stealthily takes Miguel out through the side door. Outside Outside in the parking lot, Mauricio sees that Jim's truck, along with the boy, has disappeared. He decides to go to the United States to find them and neutralize the threat. Returning to Arizona, Jim spends some time at his ranch. He gathers some clothes, defensive gear, and whatever little cash he has left and prepares to leave. When he returns to his car, he finds Miguel missing. The boy has taken another route. At the same time, Mauricio and his men begin crossing the border illegally. The border officer hesitates at first, but quickly realizes they are cartel supporters. Feeling his life is in danger, the officer lets them pass without a fight, but Jim finds Miguel near the ranch. He convinces him that if they catch him, they will finish him without mercy. The two set off together toward Chicago. As Jim drives, he tells Miguel, "Do what your mother told you. I'll drop you off with your family in Chicago." But the boy remains silent. Jim thinks that perhaps Miguel doesn't understand him. Meanwhile, upon entering the United States, Mauricio heads straight to Jim's farm. He enters the house, searches every room, and finds numerous credit card receipts and an old Marine Corps badge. Seeing this, he realizes everything. Jim is no ordinary farmer, but a trained Marine, meaning a very dangerous man. Mauricio takes the badge and orders his men to burn the house down. Moments later, the entire farm is ablaze. Meanwhile, Jim stops at a gas station, fills up the tank, and takes a paper map of Chicago. Based on the credit card receipts, the cartel alerts their network in the United States. A short while later, Jim calls Sarah, who tells him that the cartel has burned down his farm. Jim sits in the car, angrily talking to himself. Then Miguel suddenly responds in clear English. Jim is astonished that the boy understood him from the start. Miguel says he doesn't want to stay here, and Jim says he's doing the right thing for his own good. "We're going to Chicago, to your family," Miguel snaps. "I don't even want to live in your stupid country." Meanwhile, Jim's location is immediately traced through a credit card transaction at a gas station. Mauricio arrives with his men within minutes. He goes inside and asks the cashier where Jim went. When she refuses to tell him, he pulls out a weapon, threatens her, and then leaves. Looking at the security footage, he learns that Jim is heading east. Further down the road, Jim's truck breaks down, and he takes it to a nearby garage. The mechanic tells him the shop is closed. With nowhere else to go, Jim takes Miguel to a small diner nearby. It's there that they talk openly for the first time. They properly introduce themselves. Jim asks why the cartel is after him. Miguel explains that his uncle was in serious trouble with the cartel and is now being targeted because of him. When Jim asks about his father, Miguel quietly says he died before he was born. The two sleep in the truck that night. In the morning, Jim wakes up to find Miguel and Jackson missing. He panics, but a short while later, Miguel returns with some groceries. Jim is relieved. He repairs the truck and the two continue on. They drive, looking at a map. Meanwhile, Jim's car repair payment once again traces his location. Mauricio sets off in that direction with his team. During the trip, Jim and Miguel grow closer. Jim recounts stories of his childhood trips to Chicago. The atmosphere is peaceful and pleasant, but then a police car approaches from behind, sirens blaring. The police signal them to stop. The officer approaches and asks Jim for his license. Jim calmly explains that he has a legally licensed firearm and can produce the papers. However, the officer becomes suspicious. He takes Jim's firearm and says he also needs to question the boy in the car. Jim feels uneasy but cooperates and quietly follows the officer on patrol. He walks to the car. As Jim sits in the back, he notices the officer talking softly on his phone, as if giving information to someone and trying not to be overheard. Jim now understands this isn't a simple traffic check. He's convinced the officer is wasting time and is probably working with the cartel. Jim asks, "How much did you get for selling your badge?" The officer immediately draws his firearm, but Jackson lunges at him. Jim jumps out, overpowers him, and without hesitation, knocks the officer unconscious. He then runs back to the truck, takes Miguel, and leaves before the cartel can reach him. A short while later, Mauricio and his men arrive. They find the officer half-conscious. When they ask him where Jim went, he is unable to answer. In a rage, Mauricio eliminates him. While searching the area, he finds Jim's roadmap and takes it. Jim and Miguel watch all this unfold from a distant hill. Miguel panics. "I don't know what's happening or where we're going." Jim stops at a gun store and buys a new firearm. He calls Sarah and learns that the man he neutralized was Mauricio's brother. Sarah begs him to bring the boy back, but Jim, even under pressure, simply says he'll leave him unharmed. As night falls, they check into a small motel. They sit and talk throughout the evening, getting to know each other better. Miguel says, "The first thing I want to do when I get to Chicago is eat a hot dog." Later, Jim gets up and takes Jackson outside for some fresh air. Upon leaving, he sees cartel members lurking nearby. Jim quickly returns to the room, wakes Miguel, and reports a fake robbery to the police to distract them. He then quietly takes Miguel out the window and into the bushes. A short while later, the cartel bursts into the room, but Jim is gone. Mauricio angrily shouts, "You eliminated my brother! I'll find you!" Jim tells Miguel to wait in the truck. He's going to get Jackson. But when he returns, everything is over. Jackson, loyal as ever, confronts Mauricio, barking and trying to protect him. Mauricio fires without hesitation, and Jackson falls to the ground. The sound of gunfire echoes through the night. They bury the dog in a quiet spot nearby and mark the place with a stone. Upon seeing the stash of cash, Miguel angrily angrily suspects Jim. "You were only helping me for money?" he asks. Jim sadly denies it. Miguel angrily walks away. A short while later, he returns, remorseful, and the two reconcile. They stop at a small church. Miguel kneels and prays for his mother. Jim stands quietly behind him. The priest asks, "Is that boy his grandson?" Jim replies softly, "No, his mother knew me. She made me promise to protect him." Jim then calls Sarah and explains everything. Sarah warns that the situation has become very dangerous and that they should hand Miguel over to the authorities. But Jim refuses. "I promised Rosa no matter what, I'll get him safely to his relatives," he says. They both head back toward Chicago. As Jim and Miguel draw closer to Chicago, Mauricio and his men continue searching for clues. Finally, they find a map left in Jim's car. The map has a red circle around Chicago, proving Jim is headed there. Mauricio immediately contacts the group's members in Chicago and orders them to eliminate Jim and the boy as soon as they arrive. Sometime later, Miguel joins Jim while he practices with his rifle in the woods. Curious, Miguel asks to learn, and Jim teaches him how to aim properly, shoot safely, and disassemble the firearm. Miguel vows that when he grows up, he will eliminate everyone who harmed his family. Jim looks at him seriously and says, "Taking a life is nothing to be proud of. Your mother gave her life so you could have a better future. Don't trade her memory for revenge. Honor her." That night, they stop under an old bridge. To keep warm, they light a fire and throw bundles of cartel money into it. Money no longer matters to them. Life and freedom matter. The next morning, they reach the outskirts of Chicago. On the way, Jim sees two suspicious men watching their car from an overpass. He immediately recognizes the danger and turns onto a dirt road, but cartel vehicles begin to pursue them. After a while, a car approaches and tries to cut them off. Jim turns the truck to avoid it, and the other car crashes into the trees and overturns. The truck's radiator begins to fail. Jim drives the vehicle to an open, deserted area and stops. Using his military experience, he steadies his breath, takes aim, and fires. The bullet strikes the driver of the car Mauricio is riding in. The car spins out of control and crashes. 3 people get out, Mauricio and 2 of his men. One of them opens fire at Jim. Jim grabs Miguel and runs to an old, abandoned farmhouse. They hide inside a dusty shed. Jim takes position near a broken window and tells Miguel, "If anything happens to me, escape through this glass." A cartel man advances toward them. Jim takes aim and fires, neutralizing him. Now 2 enemies remain. Jim tells Miguel to stay inside and fires a shot in the air to distract them. As soon as the enemy comes out, Jim quietly moves toward him and neutralizes him at the first opportunity, leaving only Mauricio remaining. Moments later, Mauricio enters the shed, grabs Miguel, and points a gun at him. He angrily orders Jim to drop the weapon. Jim slowly lowers the gun. Mauricio makes his move. He places the gun in Miguel's hand and says, "Pull the trigger. Today you too become a soldier and eliminate your first enemy." But Miguel remembers the lesson Jim taught him. He has quietly emptied the magazine of his weapon. When he pulls the trigger, the gun just clicks. Mauricio is startled and tries to react. At that very moment, Jim pounces and a fierce fight ensues. They fall to the ground, striking each other. During the fight, Miguel picks up the gun and points it at Mauricio. Mauricio doesn't plead. He smiles, provoking the boy to fire. Jim sees the pain and anger in Miguel's eyes and tells him, "Don't do this. Don't take this burden." He gently takes the gun from Miguel's hand and fires a shot. The bullet strikes Mauricio. As Jim prepares to raise his weapon again, Mauricio, covered in blood, pulls something from his pocket, the same Navy badge he stole from Jim's house. Jim takes it back and says, "Decide now. Face it." Mauricio, summoning his last courage, picks up the gun and ends his own life. The gunshot echoes through the area. The danger is finally over. Jim and Miguel set out again. They arrive at the address Rosa had left. Miguel knocks on the door. His aunt and grandmother open it. Before Miguel can speak, Jim quietly turns and walks away. He reaches the bus stop. Carrying the weight of everything, he boards the bus and sits near the window. He takes a deep breath and closes his eyes. The fight is over. The promise has been fulfilled. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please hit the subscribe button. Your support helps us continue bringing more amazing stories like this.